Finally, a peaceful protest in Portland. But who are the Proud Boys and how do they relate to Antifa? Welcome back to Free to Disagree. My name is Amanda MacDonald. Today I have with me my friend and student, local resident in Portland, Brooklyn Mills, here to talk about the issue and help us dissect it a little bit. Brooke, how are you doing today and what's it like on the ground in Portland after the protests over the weekend?
Hi, Amanda. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on. I haven't gone downtown since the protest happened, but I did work last night. Mm-hmm. I work in a big restaurant. A Saturday night, we usually bring in pretty good clientele. We can expect to usually sell $25,000 in sales.
Whoa.
Last night was absolutely dead. We didn't even hit 10. It was very slow, and it was very. I could feel the fear coming out of the people who were out. I was able to see that a lot of people were scared to go out in general. A lot of people knew about what was going on. There were mass warnings that went out to all the residents to be safe and to avoid the area. So a lot of people were scared to go out. A lot of people are scared of what's going on. They don't want the hatred here, whether it's on the left or the right side. And it's been interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, I saw that the mayor went ahead and made a statement just prior to the actual event. I think he posted on August 7th saying that anybody, regardless of left or right affiliation, that they didn't want any violence in Portland. And I did a little bit of reading of your local newspaper there. What did you say it was called?
The Oregonian.
The Oregonian, that's right. And the Oregonian reported from a bunch of people on Saturday morning about how those individuals just essentially really didn't want the violence there and they weren't going to go to the protest. But didn't you say that a lot more people showed out than that?
Yeah. It was estimated that 12 to 1,300 people showed up to the protest in downtown Portland that morning, which is a lot to turn out to an event that so many people are worried about. Luckily, this event didn't get violent, so we're very thankful for that. Maybe that means we are moving along as a race. Maybe we're actually learning how to work these things out without violence. But realistically, both of the main extremist groups who came together have the idea that violence can be deployed at any time. And so that's worrisome, and I think that's why a lot of people are scared to have them here.
Right.
And that's why they're scared to sit down and actually work out these issues, because violence is what comes up so often.
Right, exactly. I was looking at, because when we were talking about this before, you were saying that there was a lot of conflicting information going on about who Antifa is or who the Proud Boys are. And so I went to the Anti-Defamation League and I started to look at kind of the definitions and how they talk about each of these groups to kind of get a better handle on it. And so the Anti-Defamation League talks about Antifa and says that these are violent counter-protesters who are often members of Antifa, a loose collection of groups, networks, and individuals who believe in active, aggressive opposition to far right-wing movements. Their ideology is rooted in the assumption that the Nazi Party would have never been able to come to power in Germany if people had more aggressively fought them in the streets in the 1920s and the 30s. Most Antifa come from the anarchist movement or from the far left, though since Trump's election, people with more mainstream political backgrounds have also joined their ranks. Do you see any evidence of that in Portland, and does that seem like a fair definition of what you guys have seen there so far in the last couple of years?
It's interesting because within the past few years, and yes, since the 2016 election, is when we've seen the emergence of a lot of these groups.
Right. Realistically,
a lot of them were not out and open in the way that they are now, 4 years ago. When I first moved here, I was warned about the right side extremist groups, the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer, which are two of the main ones. However, Antifa wasn't really mentioned very often.
That's interesting.
It wasn't really brought up. It wasn't like, hey, watch out for them, which is interesting because most of them live in Portland, and a lot of those in the right-wing groups whether they be in Washington or Portland or other states, a lot of them are actually coming here to do these protests compared to many of the members of Antifa who are Portland residents and Oregon residents. So that's really interesting. So it seems like there's more of a stigma towards the right group.
Right, which would make sense in Portland, right? I mean, you guys are pretty left-leaning in general out there.
Right, definitely are. And so there's way more of a stigma and a fear towards the right side than there is the left, even though the left side is being as extreme with the bombs and the concrete throwing and everything that they're deploying as well.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that as far as the history is concerned with Antifa in Portland? Like, have the protests been violent all the way around? Is this the first time that it's been peaceful since, 2016 when Donald Trump got elected? Because it seems like it's winding down, and or the presence of the Proud Boys is winding them down. Is that accurate at all, or no?
That's difficult. While I'm really glad that we had a peaceful protest yesterday, we don't know if that's the beginning of a trend.
Right.
I think that's going to be easier to decide in the next, let's say 3 protests, which are hopefully also peaceful. But it kind of seems like throughout, the past, most of them, especially in Portland, have turned violent. I have an NPR article pulled up, and it's talking about in 2018 when the Portland Police Department claimed riot, when the same groups as yesterday's protest were in Portland fighting it out. And there was many, many levels of assault and people getting hurt, people throwing things, beating each other up on both groups. Realistically, there wasn't one group that stood out in it more.
Right.
I believe the riot was actually called when the Patriot Prayer initiated its permitted march going down 3rd Avenue, but projectiles quickly began flying from both groups, and that was when police canceled it and then claimed it a riot. So
right.
It's hard because they're both extreme and they're both being violent, yet the mayor, Wheeler, as we were talking about earlier, he also only mentioned the right side. He only directed his claim to the Proud Boys and to the Patriot Prayer, not anything about Antifa on the left side.
Okay, so speaking of the Proud Boys, then who are the Proud Boys and how are they constructed? That was kind of like my question, and that's been the question of a lot of my viewership, actually, is who are the Proud Boys? And so, continuing with the Anti-Defamation League, I went ahead and I looked up some more stuff, and it says that the Proud Boys were founded by Gavin McInnes, and they're a right-wing fraternity who present themselves as proponents of mainstream conservative values, but engage in extreme, often violent tactics to promote their agenda. The group is not cohesive and is highly decentralized. Is that the case with the Proud Boys? Because I also heard you mention, Patriot Prayer.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, what was your question about the Proud Boys?
Yeah, are they actually as decentralized as the Anti-Defamation League is claiming? Are they made of a bunch of many subgroups?
As far as I've come to see, the basis of their group is based on white nationalism, and men. I have their website pulled up, and this article it says, our group is and always will be men only, born with a penis, if that wasn't clear enough for you leftists. If you are or were born a woman, and you want to be involved, there's a girls group called the Proud Boys as Girls. And so it seems like I'm sure that they do have those smaller groups who also follow behind them.
Right.
But they have a set value list. You know what I mean? They have a select interests that they are very extreme about. and a lot of people may or may not fit into that group. And so while there's a lot of groups on the right side who altogether are extreme groups, they have different interests and different things that they're looking at. I think that's why there's so many groups on the right side that have emerged. Let's see, I have that yesterday the groups that were expected to show were the Proud Boys, American Guard, who are known to be white nationalists, the 3%ers, who are known to be anti-government militia groups, and the Daily Stormers, who are neo-Nazis.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you think the Proud Boys are getting their rap of white nationalism from those subgroups kind of rallying around them on the basis that it's kind of like a male fraternity? Because I was watching this CNN clip just yesterday, and it had a Cuban man on there as a speaker for the Proud Boys talking to a CNN reporter about the protests, and he said, no, white nationalism is not something that we are, and he called himself a Western chauvinist. And said that essentially all they're about is being patriotic about their country and that it has nothing to do with race. Is there any way to tease those groups apart at all, or kind of in Portland has it all kind of mixed together into being they're all the Proud Boys basically?
I would say that there's been several of these groups that I learned about while doing research into this I hadn't heard of previously. And so I think there is, that the Proud Boys is kind of all of those groups of those big scary men who are coming in and being really angry, and a real right side.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe too that, as you said, maybe they're the umbrella. And maybe, all those smaller groups are kind of just underneath there, going off of their ideologies and listening to what they're doing and seeing how they're reacting in public.
Right. Because I think when we were talking about this earlier, you said that there was a specific group that was trying to break apart from the Proud Boys because it wasn't combating white nationalism enough. Was that the that Oath group that you mentioned?
Yes. I think I would have to try and find that article again.
Oh, that's all right.
But yeah, there's several of them, and like I said, even though they're all in that extreme right area, those really strong interests that they all have, they're trying to act on, which is kind of, maybe separating those groups.
Okay. So it seems like over the past couple of years then, it's just been violent protest after violent protest after violent protest. And you being someone new who moved there and having people tell you about these protests, has there been any kind of economic backlash from these protests, like as far as tourism is concerned or small businesses? Because I noticed that the mayor had mentioned, even on his Twitter account, let's show our small businesses extra love today. A block away from the protests, businesses are acting normal. And it seems to me he's very much focused on trying to make sure that people believe that Portland is still a good city to go to and to have tourists and to kind of, participate in Oregon life.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a really busy, populated area. People love coming to the area, to Portland, to Oregon. It's beautiful. The protest that happened yesterday happened directly downtown in the waterfront. So Oregon, Portland, the Willamette River goes directly right down the middle.
Right.
Everything on the left is going to be your south, or your southwest and your northwest. Mm-hmm. Everything on the right side is your east. And so they met right on the water and moved throughout a very populated part of the city. And a lot of those businesses did suffer from it. For instance, I was reading about a 5K, which had been planned for the past 10 months, that happened to be scheduled on the same day as the protests. I mean, the protests were brought after.
Right. The protests were only scheduled about 2 months ago.
Right. And so, many things they had to change their plans. The 5K was going to go on that side of the river. And obviously people are terrified. They're not trying to go run a 5K when there's severe terrorism protests happening.
Right.
And so a lot of those got rescheduled. They got moved. A lot of people didn't show up. They had very low attendance. There are several restaurants who suffered of people not coming out in Portland.
Right.
Let's see, the Kells Irish restaurant, which is really popular. It says not even just yesterday, but several times in the past, they've had to close down because of these demonstrations. 7 times in the past, they've had to force close.
Wow.
Because of demonstrations and chaos that is going on downtown around them. So wow. I'm sure that it has a severe impact on the economy, whether that be just from the residents and those who live here to people coming and visiting. Right. People are scared. People are scared to go out. They don't know what's going to happen.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. I hope that you stay safe out there, and any further research that you do or any further activism you may be involved in or may not be involved in, that it pans out well for you, because it seems like things are kind of becoming more and more contentious as the days go on. Although that protest was peaceful yesterday, Saturday, which I'm super grateful for. I do worry because I thought that I heard one of the Proud Boys say that they're going to have continued protests there every month. Is that right?
Every month. Yeah, the Proud Boys claimed victory over the protest yesterday, and they made a statement to Wheeler, to the mayor, and said that they plan on having their marches once a month in Portland until Antifa is abolished, until they're gone.
Wow.
They said.
Well, I'm hoping that the businesses survive and that Portland doesn't turn into, the next Detroit over these protests, especially when people are working so hard in Portland to keep it beautiful.
I agree, definitely. And, a lot of this is starting because those on the right side, they know they can get a reaction out of those in Portland because it is such a liberal left side state. And so, I really don't know of ways that we can solve this or to bring peace in between those groups when both of them have such extreme ideas and wants and how things should go, but so differently. And especially when both of them believe that violence can be brought in, obviously it's not going to end well.
Right.
And that's really hard, for sure. I know that Portland, it said there were over 100 organizations that were deployed throughout all of Portland when the protest happened.
Yeah, something like 1,000 police officers.
Yeah, so many. I work with a girl, and her husband is a Portland police officer, and I think he worked a 32-hour shift or something like that because every single police officer was deployed to be downtown ready for it. One of the main bridges over the water was closed down at 4 a.m. to prepare for it.
Wow.
So.
That's insane. Well, I hope that you stay safe out there, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me a little bit about it and kind of giving us the on-the-ground feel of what Portland is like, and I hope that the fear kind of disintegrates a little bit and Portland can get back to normal.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad, we could talk about it and kind of figure out who's on what and who's playing part of it and who feels on what. Yeah, definitely.
All right, Brooklyn. Well, you have a good night, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Have a good night.
Yep.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. So there you have it. Portland, Oregon, they are fearful and they are worried about what's going to happen in the coming months of these protests. And I guess that we'll see, and we'll keep you updated here at Free to Disagree. Y'all have a good one.